Good morning and welcome back. We are now coming towards the end of those special stories which only occur in St. Luke's Gospel. Today we are at Luke chapter 24, verses 13 to 35, and these are the amazing events that took place on the Emmaus Road and back in Jerusalem shortly afterwards. Now look, that very same day, there were two of them heading for a village called Emmaus, which was just under 10 kilometers from Jerusalem. They were talking to each other about all the things that had been happening. Then this happened as they were talking and discussing it all. Jesus himself came over and walked along with them. Something was holding them back from recognizing him. He said to them, "Tell me all you've been talking about as you've been walking along." They stopped walking and looked sad. The one named Cleopas answered, "You must be the only person who's come to Jerusalem who doesn't know what's been going on these last few days." "What things?" Jesus asked. They said to him, "Well, all about Jesus of Nazareth. He was a prophet, a brilliant speaker, who did amazing things, seen by God and by everyone. And about how our chief priests and rulers handed him over to be condemned to death. They had him crucified. We had been hoping that he was the one who would redeem Israel. And besides, it's now the third day since all this happened. And what's more, some women we know told us something amazing. Early in the morning, they were at his tomb, but they didn't find his body there. When they came back, they said they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. So some of us went to the tomb and discovered it was just as the women had said, but they didn't see him." And Jesus said to them, "How foolish you are! How slow your minds are to believe all that the prophets said. It was necessary that Christ should suffer these things and enter into glory." Then, starting with Moses and continuing with the prophets, he interpreted the scriptures for them and showed them everything there was about himself. Finally, they came near to their destination. He made as if to go on, but they persuaded him not to. "Stay with us," they said, "because it's evening and the day's nearly over." So he went in and stayed with them. And when he was sitting at the table with them, he took the bread, blessed it and broke it and gave it to them. Their eyes were opened and they recognized him, but he became invisible to them. And they said to each other, "Weren't our hearts burning inside of us whilst he was talking to us on the road, explaining the scriptures to us?" So within the hour they got up and went back to Jerusalem. They found the 11 and others meeting together, who told them, "It's true, the Lord has really risen and has met with Simon." Then they told everyone what had happened on the road and how they recognized him when he broke the bread. Well, if Luke had not recorded this story for us in his Gospel, this story, which appears nowhere else in the New Testament, how much poorer our understanding of the risen Christ would have been. As these two minor disciples were walking the 6 or 7 miles home from Jerusalem, someone joined them, and they assumed it was just a fellow traveller. But later, when he withdrew from their sight at the supper table, suddenly they realized something important. First, they knew who it was, and then they knew he was no longer the subject of the limitations he had before as a normal human being. Looking back on what they had experienced, it seemed so odd to them that they hadn't recognized him. Something they couldn't explain had shielded them from understanding. until, as Luke says, their eyes were opened and they recognized him. There was something special about the way Jesus took the bread and broke it. They had not been there at the Last Supper, so they must have been there on other occasions when he had shared the bread. But Luke must have had in mind all the occasions when Luke himself had shared the Eucharistic bread and wine, and will have valued the recognition of Jesus' presence in the breaking of the bread. Do we have any idea who Cleopas and the other disciple were? Well, there is a possibility that Cleopas is the same person as the Clopas we read about in John 19:25, and his wife was called Mary, and they naturally would have lived together. She would have been one of the women by the cross of Jesus. So the destiny of old Israel was to be fulfilled, as Jesus showed his ministry to the two of them, being foreshadowed in the Old Testament. How again and again the people had failed God, but God had rescued them each time. God had wanted a people to emerge who were holy with God's holiness and dedicated to do his will. And in a world that had organized itself to resist his will, this purpose could only be achieved if the people in this new community were willing in their turn to take up their cross and follow him. The story continues in Luke's Gospel tomorrow.